Welcome to Soul of Travel. I am super excited and happy to be sitting down today with Prachi Thakur, and she is a diversity strategist and with World Women Tourism. And today we are going to get to really talk about a lot of things that I am passionate about with what else travel can be a catalyst for, and using travel really as this vehicle for getting us into different spaces, which I think sounds kind of vague at this moment, but as we roll through this conversation, I think you'll see what I'm talking about. So first off, just welcome. I'm so glad that you're here with me today.
Thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate being here, and amount of conversation we have had are quite few, but quite meaningful. So I'm super delighted to be here.
Thank you. I agree. I feel like our very first conversation was so good. We were connected through a past Soul of Travel guest who just thought that we needed to connect. And I'm so grateful when that happens, because it was very apparent right away that we have a lot of similar passions within the industry and what we feel can happen when we focus on this in the space of travel. So as I mentioned, Prachi is a TEDx speaker, diversity trainer, and she focuses on building inclusive workspaces for women in the tourism and hospitality industry. I would love you to take a moment and introduce yourself and share anything else that you want to talk about, who you are in the space of travel right now, and then we will go from there.
Sure. Thank you so much. So that's a very humbling introduction, by the way. And yes, so I'm a diversity researcher and a trainer and a strategist. So it's all a lot of roles that I play at different times. But I'm primarily a researcher who brings research to training, because I believe that, we can learn a lot of lessons from past, as well as, utilize them in, modifying the future. Because, I have this saying of my own, which I think I got from some conference, that what worked for your father won't work for you. So that's what I want to learn, what my father did wrong. And then I want to, utilize it to making travel better for women. So that's what I do. And all of the different roles I play at different times collate back to this special work that I want to change travel for women. So that.
Thank you. I love that. And I'm sure this, I don't know if this will mean anything to you or not, but as you were speaking, I was like, oh, that reminds me so much of how Brene Brown talks about research and how she brings it into like practical experiences. And then as we were talking before, I'm like, oh, it's definitely like the same threads of conversation. So not to start off putting you on a pedestal, but just matching you to Brene Brown, that's all.
And that's a huge thing for me to be compared to her. Obviously her research and vulnerability and emotions is something unparalleled. So for me, just being on this pedestal is quite good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I mean, I think for me, with the specific focus with women and tourism, like it's just so much more relevant and meaningful for me. But I think it's really important how we look at research being something that's really vital to understanding our world. And I think for a long time, there's been like a big disconnect between like scientists and researchers and how we apply that practically, I guess. And so I really get excited about when people are the people that are bridging that gap. So, well, as we begin to get to know you a little bit more, I would love for you to share about, I know for most of us in the travel industry, there's been these moments where we've had powerful trips that either gave us a lot of opportunity for growth and awareness, or really became this point that shifted us into wanting to focus as tourism for a profession. So I'm wondering if you can share with us any of those sorts of meaningful travel experiences that really have gotten you to where you are today.
Sure, thank you. So I'd like to acknowledge that experience, one experience which brought me in this industry. So for people who don't know me, I was an accounting student. We used to crunch numbers, like day and night crunching numbers. And I used to love that, honestly. I didn't have complaints from life. But then I set on travel. And obviously it was, more what I wanted from travel was, I guess, one common thing which every woman wants, to feel free. To feel free from what, this was also one of the few things which I shared on my Instagram, is that when we travel, we want to be free of expectations. We want to be free of our normal routine. We want to break free of a lot of other things. The basic element is being free. So that's what I was seeking from travel industry and traveling. But then one event was that, when I was traveling in the city, and I have tattoos, like for people who don't know, I have really small tattoos, but I do have them. So I was traveling, and this one evening I'm standing at a hotel gate, and the person who is on the, receptionist, they remark, "Oh, okay, you're not coming back tonight, right?" And I'm like, why? Why won't I come back? And I am very expressive, very. So my face talks out loud things which I don't say out loud. So I was very confused and asked, why? Why? And then they told me something which hit me home. They told, "Oh, it's your time of the day." What they meant to say that I was a sex worker and evenings were my time. And I don't have any reason to believe that any other factor might have played a role in this, because I was wearing a very Indian clothing, and it wasn't revealing, which people do, factor when these kind of remarks come. And I was like, damn, having tattoos, does that make me automatically a person who works for sex? Not that it is a degrading work. I do not look at sex work like that. But you just judge someone, you coin someone, you change their identity based on something which is you found abnormal. And that was like, oh my God, that moment just changed how I look at travel. And I was like, okay, maybe this is just me, because as women we are taught to doubt ourselves. Like, we are the champions in doubting ourselves. But then I was like, okay, no, let's explore this a bit. And I started talking to other women, and turns out it wasn't the case. People of all shapes, sizes, colors, design, tattoos, colored hair, plain hair, no hair, everyone was getting judged for something. And I was like, okay, we have a problem. And that is why, and that is how I came in this industry. Because for me, this was an experiment to see what we can do as a community, or I as a researcher and trainer, to change this problem we are facing. Because obviously we are not having good experiences. Every single day we are reading reports about women getting harassed, women having complaints of bad travel. So there has to be something getting done to get rid of it. So that's my story of why I came into travel, and one meaningful or transformation which happened for me on travel. So that is one experience which I think brought me in the industry, and for good, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That is such a powerful awareness to have had, that became this question that you asked about that experience. And I'm reading right now Beyond Guilt Trips by Dr. Anu Taranath, and she talks a lot about like examining that sort of experience, right? Exactly that. Where is this discomfort coming? Where is this assumption coming? What are these labels that are happening as we're traveling? She also definitely speaks to DEI, and that's a part of her work as well. But that really reminded me of that, is really not just, I guess, letting that be a one-off experience and assuming maybe that it was and putting it all on yourself, but looking at it from this larger perspective, which you and I were just talking about, which I think is very much this researcher perspective, right? Like some of us can just internalize that experience and move forward, versus looking at what is the systemic issue, what could we be addressing, how can I serve others in these similar situations. So I really love that you shared that. And it's very interesting too that you mentioned tattoos. I have a friend that we were talking in a conversation and she was just talking about what she was packing, and she's like, oh yes, I'm going to this place and I need to make sure I can always have my tattoos covered, because that really sets the tone that I'm not a respectful woman. And I had never really heard that, but now hearing that from two travelers, women that have traveled quite often, it's very interesting that those are things that we just don't always think about. And I think especially when we're talking about serving female travelers, it's things like these that are really important to understand as well. I think it's always important to have a good understanding of the culture in which we're immersing ourselves, so that we can maybe avoid or be mentally prepared for situations like that. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that and sharing how that set you out on this journey. I think this would be a really good place to talk about solo travel for women. I know this is something, probably because of that experience, that you're really passionate about. And again, looking at this from a more systemic level, a lot of times when I've talked to women, and I know for you as well, you mentioned this in our previous conversation, that one reason why women don't travel alone is because their fear of being safe, and how they can address that, how they can be more comfortable. But what have you seen, or what are your ideas, and what conversations do you have around safety and solo travel for women?
So thank you so much for that question. And I, personally look at this problem of safety of women from a different perspective, from across the table, I would like to say. Because one thing we need to understand here is the idea of empowering women, which we have been building on for like 15, 20 centuries now. And the idea of empowered women, which I focus on. Women who are free, women who are earning, women who have options, women who want to explore options. So now we have this mix of women who are somewhere either transitioning, or women who are empowered. They travel solo, they have got tattoos like me, they're working in industries, unconventional industries, conventional industries, and women who identify as independent. The idea, I don't, since it's a very subjective term, I'm not going to define what independence means for me, but people who think, women who think they are independent. So now we have these independent women traveling, and then they are also concerned about safety. So now it's not the time to give them a list of 7 travel tips you can be to safe. No, I think we really, really, really need to move a step ahead and look at what can we do as an industry to make women feel safer. Because yes, there are problems in the larger society, that the dark alleys, don't go to dark alleys, don't go to, wear revealing clothes to hide your tattoos. We are completely listening that for ages now. Now is the time that if your guest is not feeling safe inside the hotel, what are you doing about it? Because one of the research, I think it was about one of the authors' name is Jogratnam, some university in US, I'm forgetting the name, but I'll pull it up soon later. They did a research to identify what was the problem, what was number one concern of business women travelers. So now we are talking about women travelers who are elite, right? Women who, are upper class travelers. Let's not talk about the middle or the lower budget travelers. Let's talk about the elite travelers. Number one reason they cited for the reason they look for booking a hotel is the safety concern. And that is just one more trigger to understand how big this problem is. That when people are paying a lot of money, when people are paying for having an elite experience, and still they are concerned about whether the door has 15,000 kind of locks, or whether they have like women security guards, we have a problem. We have a problem. We don't know how to behave with women. It's as simple as that. Yeah. When I began in this industry a few years ago, I used to try to kind of be very modest about the problems we have, but there is no other way to be modest about it. We don't know how to behave with women. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And
yeah, thank you. I really I really appreciate the bold stance, because I agree that I think these topics are ones that have been put under the rug or uncomfortable. Again, it's like any conversation that makes us uncomfortable, or we don't have an easy answer to, or we have no answer to. It's just much easier to be like, well, let's just talk about these other things. And that's where that list comes from, right? That safety list or whatever. But this is when you and I talked initially, that I was just so excited to think about, okay, how are hotels making women feel safe? How are restaurants? How are transportation services? And I think it was questions I never really asked myself before, which I was really surprised about, because this is something that I am already thinking about. And if I'm someone who's already thinking about it and I'm not asking these questions, then, you know, who is? And so I just thought it really caught me off guard. It really actually got me fired up and a little bit excited, because I thought, well, there's so much room for growth. There's so much room for understanding. If we are looking for signs that hotels, restaurants, transportation, et cetera, are creating a safer environment for women, what would someone be looking for?
So there are top 3 things which I, let's call it strategies. Well, these are very broad strategies, and definitely these have to be implemented like in step-by-step things, or, people will need time to absorb it, because obviously, going back to that, statement, what worked for my father won't work for me. So if we have been running hotels on manuals which are dated back to 1870s, we better update that manuals. So top 3 things. First thing is bring diversity training in. That's first and foremost suggestion which I give to people. And why I do that is that, I'll bring a very short context here. I posted about this on my LinkedIn a few days ago, that how we have a heart problem and we are like, oh, it's not that big of an issue. Physician is also a doctor, so I think they can handle that. We are doing the literal same thing with hospitality and tourism. Because diversity issue is not a training issue. It's an interdisciplinary issue where you talk about emotions, where you talk about how to behave with other people, where you talk about self-reflection. So it's a very complicated area. You cannot have 5 modules on diversity and then give it to your trainer or your HR head and then be like, ha, we are done. Doesn't work that way. So bring diversity training in, because unless you want to get a heart attack, that you better go to a cardiologist when you have a heart issue. It's as simple as that. And why I give the example of cardiologist is because we have that serious problem. It's not to be treated lightly, especially given, bringing some more perspective to diversity and why it is more important for hospitality and tourism. 2 years of pandemic, which had like a semicolon pause and full stop of all kind of travel, people got time to reflect on themselves, and people came out in terms of identities, in terms of, belonging. And now the travelers you will have after, the pandemic has ended are very different from the travelers who were traveling in 2019. These are very aware travelers, too much into sustainable society and how you are treating your employees, how you're treating your customers, and are looking for very meaningful experiences. Now, if your staff does not know how to interact with these people, depending on their identity, because maybe your staff wasn't trained on how to use pronouns, how to use, address different pronouns, you're going to ruin their meaningful time. And you are going to have economic loss. So it's like a very long chain of events. But first and foremost thing people need to do in hospitality and tourism is to bring diversity training. We need to have cardiologists rather than going to physician. So that is the first thing. Second thing is being meaningful and effortful in the efforts you're taking about diversity. And why I say that is, I'll tell you one experience why I say that. A person from a very good famous tourism agency contacted me, and they were like, hi Prachi, we really want to work with you and we really want to make our organization more inclusive. And I was like, wow, cool, nice. And he was like, oh, okay, so how do we proceed? And I was like, okay, you know what? Let's begin with 2 sessions because I need to know your staff first, because I go on and preach them. I'm not a preacher. I don't have a list of like 70 things which I will tell you and bam, you'll be all inclusive. It doesn't happen like that. So, and he was like, and I told him my rates that, okay, you know what? This is my code. And they're like, okay, we'll get back to you. Guess who didn't get back to me? The person. You want to be inclusive, you want to treat your heart issues, but you're not ready to invest in the pacemaker. Won't work. You really, really need to be meaningful about the efforts you're taking. And then one other thing which I want to say, that people saying about, we want to be inclusive. Of who? Of who? You want to be inclusive of women, you want to have accessible travel, you want to talk about people with physical disability, people with mental disability, people, you are talking about the rainbow spectrum, you are talking about identity. Who do you want to include? Inclusion is a very big umbrella. So before you go out on searching cardiologists, you need to determine what problem you have. Because not everyone needs a pacemaker. Some get treated by blood pressure medicines and they're good to go for life. So that is second thing. The third thing which I recommend is the leadership to be invested in it. Another problem which I really, really come across in talking to people is that people come to me as CEOs and people, managers of hotels, and they're like, we need diversity training for employees. And I'm like, oh, that's nice, cool. What about you? We are fine. You're not. Trust me, you're not. Because people think that it is one-man problem. And if I am training the customer contact employee, I'm going to be all inclusive for whole my life. Doesn't work that way. Unless the father knows what decision to take, the son is not going to pick up. So we do need diversity training primarily for the customer contact employees, but what is not committed at the heart of the organization will definitely not stay for the longer term. And one bonus tip I'll give, this is the prime 3 things I talk about, but the 4th thing which I want to emphasize on is that people expect this to be a one-time solution forever. It really doesn't work. It's like going to a gym for 1 day in a year and expecting to have a summer board for whole the year. It really doesn't work because you're eating for the rest of the 364 days and you will have fat. So it's the same thing with inclusion. You cannot have one diversity training or one 7-day workshop and you think that you're going to be all inclusive for whole your life. Doesn't work that way. So these are my 3 prime tips and 1 bonus tip for anyone in the industry who wants to be more meaningfully effective for inclusion.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate just the straightforwardness with your approach. And I think, these conversations, again, going back to people just step away or, like you said, kind of try to address it as minimally and quickly and maybe even as discreetly as possible. And I think, what you're sharing and what I've seen through my own journey is that, you read one thing and you're like, oh, here's 20 other things. And then you read the 20 other things and you start to understand them about yourself and your life and how you interact. And then there's 20 more things and you're like, oh, I don't know if this is actually ever ending. So this idea that it's this one and done, or like you said, here's the workbook, read it, now we're fine. It definitely doesn't work that way. And I think, obviously just getting the conversation going is where you really do have to start, because we don't even know the questions to ask until we start picking away at it and uncovering it within ourselves, and then how that comes into our workplace. And I think it'll be really interesting to see, and I would be curious, maybe what experiences you have, but because this is it's a unique thing in the workplace where if you're normally talking about marketing or budgets or finances or inventory, this is all your business, right? They all only relate to your business. It's not going to get tied up in your emotional baggage. But when you start talking about DEI and you start looking at some of these things, you are going to be tapping into people's personal spaces, and they're not going to grow as employees or members of, the service industry or leadership industry without taking this to a personal level. And so I'm wondering, what does that look like when people have that realization that it isn't just this like corporate, policy. This is something that is actually a real personal issue that they're going to have to address.
That is a very interesting perspective you brought in, and thank you so much for that. I'd like to share one thing which happened in last year, when I was delivering for one of the hospitality management institutions in India. So I had designed a diversity course, which is first of its kind. We don't have any diversity course in India. So that's one thing. But I designed a diversity training course and I was delivering it. And one of the modules focused on emotional intelligence. So when the module began, I had the first question from the class that why are we talking about emotions? And that conversation went really insightful. But one thing which I want to acknowledge here, that people chicken out. People chicken out when it comes to talking about their emotions. Because see, where it all comes from is that we are trained with an idea. We are fed with an idea that personal and professional life are different. It all roots down to that idea, because you're not supposed to feel emotional at work. Why? Because emotions are a part of your personal life. And guess where it belongs? It belongs in personal life. So that idea that we are fed with, that, the personal and professional life is different, is the one which challenges people's, perspective towards addressing diversity, because you cannot identify problems of biases of your own beliefs, of what you bring to the table, unless you talk about emotions, unless you know what you feel about it, unless you know that, okay, maybe, it is uncomfortable, or maybe it should feel uncomfortable, or maybe talking about it makes you feel uncomfortable. These all are emotions. And you cannot have diversity training without talking about how emotions play a role in it. And I think it's a matter of taking a conversation forward, of understanding that people come to work. It's as simple as that. So if humans are walking in the workplace, you cannot have a different personal professional life. You cannot expect in 2022 that people will not bring their personal life to professional space. While that doesn't mean that, okay, an employee is sitting and crying in a corner whole day, but that also can mean that something is affecting that employee. And as a manager, as a person, you need to take that emotional empathy out, that, okay, why don't we talk about what's happening here? And I'll share one experience, or one of the conversations I've had on why emotions come in. So this lady, I was talking to her, and she shared that in one of her internships, hospitality internships, she bent over to take a spoon from a drawer, and one of the senior staff smacked her butt. And she was like, while that seems like a very small issue, oh my God, it was just butt, he just smacked me. But that lady that time wasn't going through a lot of positive life events. So that one thing, which was supposedly very, very small in someone else's view, impacted that lady so badly, she took real good time to recover out of it. And these all are, these all issues come from, why do we, objectify women? Why do we objectify women's body parts, that you have to smack it every time people bend down? So you cannot talk about diversity training and these very minute harassment things. It's minute, but it's harassment thing, which happens without emotions, because you are affecting people's emotions when you don't learn how to behave with people. It's as simple as that, I guess. So
I feel like just the statement, people come to work, feels so profound, and I don't know why, because it should be so obvious. But I just think of how many times I've been in a job where I felt like I should be like a machine coming to work, right? I should be an employee at work, not a human at work. And,
yes.
And we do have all of our life experiences that come with us. And then when they say leave your work at work and your home at home, you're like, well, it's really impossible to do those things.
Yes.
And especially, I think if you're fortunate enough to start working in something that you are really deeply passionate about, it's coming from you, literally. Your work is, my work is. So I'm never separate from my work, which is what, in fact, I think makes it more valuable, is because we're learning how to work from this space of authenticity and passion. And so really embracing that human identity feels like a very important shift in the workplace, like you said, to even begin to address some of these larger issues.
That is true, and that is true. And I really want to pick one sentence you said. We are expected to be employees at work. And employees are not supposed to have emotions. Employees are not supposed to have relationships. Employees are not people, they don't have lives. Employees are there to get paid. And that's what mentality we bring everywhere. But in hospitality and tourism, since I don't know whether you know the statistics, but it is the one industry which reports highest turnover in the world. According to 2019 data, every organization is losing $5,248 every month because someone or else is leaving the employee, organization, some employees leaving. So when you talk about, these issues, and when you look at the economic impact, these sarcastically, small things are bringing, it's very costly. You're paying $5,000 because you didn't do diversity training. You're paying $5,000 because you weren't cautious of what your employees are feeling. And I think that's pretty too much to pay for emotions. So it's high time that we start understanding that people are coming to work. So that.
Yeah, thank you. I really hope, and I feel like people who are listening, that is something that will really resonate, because I don't think it is a way that we are taught to think and feel about work. And so I'm really excited about that little unwrapping that we just had there. I would love for you to share a little bit more now about World Women Tourism and how that came about and the work that you're doing there specifically.
Thank you so much. World Women Tourism, love of my life. As simple as that. So World Women Tourism is actually a network intelligence agency. We like to call ourselves as a network intelligence platform. So this brings the idea of World Women Tourism started from the fact that women are obviously, only 2.3% of all the tourism leadership positions in the world is filled by women. Although, on a contrast, it is supposedly gender equal, because this is also the only industry in the world which hires 54% of women in its workforce. So you see the contrast, 54% in the industry, but only 2.3% women in the leadership positions. So this gap happens due to many factors, a lot of them. But one of the reasons which happen is because women are not connected enough. So we are fed with this competition that if you win, I lose. If I win, that means the only way I win is that you should lose. You have to lose, otherwise I don't have a chance to win it, which is not true. Definitely not true. So as World Women Tourism, as an organization, what we do is we connect women with other women in forms, and we also connect women with resources that they need in the form of training, education, webinars, seminars, all of them, to help them be a better leader. And so that's what we primarily do. We connect women with other women, and we believe in the idea of flourishing together, because this whole BS of competition doesn't really hold true when it comes to winning as a, and when we talk about, me and you both talk about sustainability a lot, right? If we have to create a sustainable future, sustainable travel, we cannot have a win-lose philosophy. We need to find a way, we need to find a ground where there's a win-win philosophy. In other words, earlier when people used to talk about diversity issues and diversity, initiatives in organization, they used to primarily count them under CSR activities, corporate social responsibilities. But now wiser organizations, I'm not saying all because all are not doing that, wiser organizations do not, completely marginalize diversity initiatives in CSR, because they know that diversity initiatives are very, very, very crucial for the bottom line as well. So that's where it comes from, the win-win philosophy. So we believe in that win-win philosophy. So we connect women with other women, we connect women with resources. So we do a lot of connecting events, we do a lot of training, and our special focus is on Asia. But yes, the world is our ground. So that's about World Women Tourism. And how it came about it, that's a fascinating journey. But I think in one simple way, I would like to say that maybe it's about, as we were saying, when work comes from you, it's not something you choose, but it's something you hunt. And why I say hunt, because it's something, it's like the musk deer, you have the smell, you run all around, but the smell is coming from you. So you're driven from some quest you have within. So World Women Tourism, connecting with Nisha, connecting with Catherine, was, I think, that musk thing. It was a very strong desire from me, which I didn't have any direction, but then universe aligned and we got together. That's like a short love story I have there.
I love it. I love that you said this is the love of your life. And I just think about too, often when I am so lucky to talk to women in the space of travel, I feel like many of them feel that way about their businesses. And I think about what the world would look like if everybody felt that way about their work. Like it would be so amazing if every person could do the thing that they're so passionate about without having to follow any sort of social norms or without any level of inequality, creating levels of success or accessibility or availability. Like if everyone could do the thing that made their heart the happiest, it just would be such a different place. And I feel so grateful to hear the stories of women who just said, okay, I'm going to do this thing that I can't get away from because it's literally chasing me from inside of me. And it's amazing just to see what happens when people say yes to that.
It's an ideal world, honestly, because sometimes, it's there are hurdles which come in. There are days when I'm like, okay, not feeling so good about things which I do, but then the light shows in. It will be definitely a very ideal world to live in where people are following their passion. But till then, till we achieve that ideal, world where everyone is hunting for what they do, I just think, honestly, I don't know whether I'm going to sound philosophical, but yeah, at the risk of sounding philosophical, I think people, whatever work they do, following passion, not following passion, I think it should be the work they do. It should be aligned with their values. Now, what value they bring to the table is completely personal thing. You don't always need to follow your passion to, align your work with your values. But yes, I definitely, coming back to the point that I am so blessed. Literally, I wake up every day and there are very few days when I don't count my, when I don't feel thankful for this opportunity I have in form of World Women Tourism, because the impact we create right now and the impact we are creating in the future, which will be visible everywhere, is just magnificent. It's surreal. It's surreal.
Yeah, thank you. And I really love what you said about even if you're not following your passion, if you're working aligned with your values, which I think a lot of people, when they think about, okay, I've heard people say, find your passion, follow your passion, do what you're passionate about. And some people are like, I just don't know what that is. Okay, that's fair, because sometimes it takes a little while before that spark ignites, but you do know your values, or you should take time to examine them. When I work with people, I always say, like, the very first thing you should do is know what your values are. And people are always like, oh, I know my values. Okay, well, what are your values? And then, it turns out it's really hard to put into words and into language. So then if you're trying to match something up to find if it is in alignment with your values, and you haven't written them down, you don't have a like checklist to put them up against, right?
True, true.
So I love that idea of just making sure, or being reminded of how important that is. And again, like what you're creating, if you're at least working from that space, you are going to feel more fulfilled and feel like you are having a larger impact. And again, this doesn't have to be, it doesn't mean you have to be doing something grandiose. Like my grandmother was a passionate baker, and I have people that are passionate teachers, people who are passionate about every type of career, every type of labor working, like building, carpentry, leather working. Like we all have these things within us. It doesn't mean it has to be that you just have to, your passion should be being some, I don't know, lawyer
Fancy
or
clothes.
something that's noble, I guess. Like everything has really value, has great value.
True,
So
true. Yes.
Anyway, so I did want to ask, with World Women Tourism, is your community a regional or global community? What are the women that you're serving? And if people are interested in the work you're doing, who are the right women to be connecting with you?
Oh, thank you so much. So we primarily focus on Asia because, three of the founders are from Asia. Nisha, Catherine, and me. I wasn't the founder, I came later, but I do count myself as an integral part of that. But yes, since we are Asian, and Asian values are more challenging for women to, build, grow up in organization, and to see that, Aradhana Koala, who is the founder of Aptamind Partners, we recently had a panel discussion on seeds, which was hosted by ADB. She said a word which I want to borrow from her. It's not the glass ceiling, it's a concrete ceiling that we are dealing with. Especially in Asia, what happens that there is a lot of cultural mix which is coming to women's life, which expects them to be the primary caregiver. And if I am even less inclined towards having babies, or maybe being a mother, or the primary daughter, wife kind of roles, I am not a good woman. It's as simple as that. It's not too complicated in Asia. It's very simple. You're either a good woman if you become a mother, wife, daughter, and blah, 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 or you're not. You cannot be both. So when it comes to Asia, it's, the cultural values get complicated a lot. And then mix it with the age, the gender, and not the gender, age and religion, you get a very dangerous cocktail. So it doesn't really work for women. So our primary focus is on, Asian women, but we do work with on a global level and deal with a lot of other sections in the world. Also because Nisha and Catherine both have been traveling and interacting and living in a lot of countries. So they kind of know the struggle women have in travel and tourism industry in different countries. So we do bring our own intersectionalities to the table while coaching and training. So the world is the playground, and if people want to reach out to us, the best way is to drop me an email at Prachi, @worldwomentourism.com, or they can simply, go on our website, worldwomentourism.com, where they'll find contact of me, contact of Nisha, or contact of Catherine. And we all are super responsive, super social media people. And, they all can also search us on LinkedIn. We are on Instagram. And any of us can be a good connecting point.
Yeah, thank you. I really love that you mentioned the focus that you have. And I think this is something else that we talked about is, when you talk about what diversity or what your strategies are in Asia, and then someone asks you to translate that program to the US, how different those are. And I think that we kind of think there's going to be this blanket handbook and that we're going to really have to look at this globally, but then regionally and very specific, like you said, even within different countries in Asia or in different religions and different, there's going to be all these different layers that we have to look at. And like you said, that intersectionality of is going to be so important to unraveling this. It can't be this one size fits all solution. It would be so amazing if it could be. But I also think there's something in that process that is the growth process, like us understanding what it means to me and you, to me and this small group. Like, as we uncover that, we are really going to be growing and learning and understanding. And while I think this has been buried under the rug of uncomfortable, it's going to be this thing that really accelerates us forward as aware people.
True. That is true. And, that is one point which I brought, and I want to pick on one of the things you mentioned is about the problems of having blanket issues. Is that, when specifically, since I am a diversity researcher, especially on diversity training has been around since 1800s, in one form or the other. But 99%, or even I dare say 100% of the work has been in Western corporate sectors. So we are not talking about it in the, travel and hospitality at all, first thing. And then there is no work done in Asia. So when we are talking about diversity issues in Asia, it is very, like the national issues are different from, obviously, India's issue will be different from Nepal's issue, although we both are like literal neighbors. But even within India, we host so many regional diversities. We have clothing difference, we have language difference, we have caste difference, we have dominating languages, we have dominating religion. So you simply cannot have blanket, trainings or coachings or leadership programs which work for women in West coming to, women in East, women in Asia. You cannot have that. And if you are attempting to, modify some work and then again do the physician thing, well, Lord save you. That's the only hope I
have. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And again, just an opportunity for like an aha moment, an understanding of seeing maybe something we hadn't thought about before. And I just, for me, that's what I live for. I love to be proved wrong or prove that I don't know something, because again, it just means like, oh, now I have this new way of understanding something. So I guess I'm maybe more comfortable with those things that people normally try to shy away from. But I really appreciate that. So the last thing that I wanted to spend a few moments talking about, this was another one of my favorite conversations that we meandered through when we talked before, but we both really love travel, and we really see travel as this vehicle for understanding and change and creating these shifts in our world. And we talked about how we got into travel with each other. And then we were talking about, and I've heard other people tell kind of a similar story of like, okay, I love to travel. I see you are working in travel. How do I do that? Like, I just want to go here, 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 and here, and here. So I want to work in travel. And like, one of my very first things is like, well, as soon as you start working in travel, you're going to find you're actually not going to be traveling, because you're planning travel, or you're doing all these other things that support travel. You might be traveling. It's not fair to say you won't be, but there's this idea that working in travel means you will travel. And so there's that kind of, I guess, myth to bust or whatever. But I think what both you and I really would love is shifting the narrative to allowing travel to be this greater area, where instead of people saying, I love to travel, I want to work in the industry, they would say, I really want a job where I can create an impact. I want to be able to support cultural preservation. I want to impact our local and global economy. I want to work in conservation. I want to work in protecting the environment. What can I do? And then travel is the answer to those questions. So without saying any more, like, I would love to hear what that brings up for you.
That is such a profound thing to actually, begin talking about. So there is this researcher, her name is Freya Higgin Du Bois. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. She has, written a lot of work, academic articles on how travel is, impactful and everything. But one sentence from one of the research paper has stuck with me, and I use it and quote and unquote it in a lot of different works I do, is that travel is a social force. Tourism is a social force. So it's not just you dress up and you have fancy hats and furs and you are like, oh my God, let's go. Travel as an industry is so much more than that. And the idea of how wide this industry is should come from the fact that taking a step back and reflecting, when people ask me that what is diversity training or what is the significance and everything, I'm like, okay, you know what, you might have come across people who work with same kind of people, who grew up in the same environment, who had, every time they maybe, if they are a man, they identify as a man, they studied in a male school, all boys school, they went to a all male office, whichever that office is, but whatever. But do you know a person on planet Earth who does not travel? No, you don't. People travel. No matter how small that travel is, they travel. And the moment they leave their home, they are making an impact, either a good one or a bad one. Because we meet people on travel, we are leaving imprints on them. We are, the way while we travel, we are interacting with environment. We are leaving our impact there. We are leaving an imprint there. We are interacting with, other people in social events. We are leaving our imprints on other people. So tourism and hospitality is the only industry which has so many touch points. And that's also making it so much dangerous. Because if people are, not conscious, they are going to leave negative imprints everywhere. And why I'm saying, especially about negative imprints is because there is this idea that you don't need efforts to grow weed. You need efforts to grow plants. If you don't do anything on a plant, a land, what will happen? Weeds will grow. And that's what happens when we travel and we don't do conscious travel. If we are not making a good impact, it's no gray impact happening. It's a bad impact. It's as simple as that. So that's it for me, that when people come to this industry, they come with a larger awareness that this industry is, yes, it's fancy. It allows us to travel. But as a researcher, I'm a travel researcher. I travel a lot, but it's not as it appears that, oh my God, I'm going to be on road for 365 days a year. No, it doesn't happen like that. This industry is so big and we have so much opportunities to making imprints on environment, on people, on cultures, on food, on dresses. Everywhere we are leaving impact, or we are taking someone else's imprint. And while coming to this industry, if people are just mindful of that imprint they're leaving, I think they are going to be seeing this industry very much differently.
So good. I am just like so full from this conversation. I really appreciate it. I feel like we could probably go on for so much longer, but I really, really appreciate all that you shared. I love your perspective and the way you look at things. That really speaks to my heart. And so I'm really glad that we got to dive into some of these topics. I hope that when people listen, reach out and share like any moments that you had with either of us. I know we'll be excited to hear from you. Before we end, I know you already mentioned how they can connect with World Women Tourism and learn more. I wanted just to give you space really quickly. You mentioned before we hopped on that you have been working with UNWTO on a recent project, and just for people that might want to follow up, can you let them know what that is and where they can find it?
So this year, I have been very fortunate to be working on, gender report for women in tourism in Asia and the Pacific. So, people who are aware about the work UNWTO does, they know that every year or every alternate year, United Nations World Tourism Organization publishes a regional report for every region of the world to see what we are doing in terms of women in tourism. Do we need any policy changes, or if any policy changes happened, how is the impact happening? So it's like a very overview of where women stand in tourism industry. And I was very, very, very fortunate and blessed to be part of this team where I co-wrote this year's gender report for women in Asia and the Pacific. And if people want to know more about that, they are free to drop me an email. I am very, very, very active on LinkedIn. So that's one place you can always find me at. And yes, and that is something, and I look forward to building more impact through that report. And I am super sure that this report is going to be a groundwork for a lot of different research and research-backed policy work. So yes, that.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. And I think a lot of us are really starting to seek that research. Like, I think this is a lot of stuff, like you said, nothing we're talking about is new. And it's a lot of stuff we feel inside of ourselves. And it's why you and I have both kind of dedicated our lives to creating space for women in connection with travel, and are really passionate about elevating women in this space. And it's so helpful to have the numbers that show what our heart knows. So I really appreciate that.
Yes, I love that. I love that, supporting numbers. And I like to say it in a way that, our heart knows what it wants, but it's so much better when even the mind knows what the heart wants. Mm-hmm. So I like to put it that way.
Yes, we love that proof. Well, before we end, the last few things I have are just 7 quick kind of fun rapid fire-ish questions. So we'll do those, and then and then I'll just thank you so much, because this has been so incredible. What is your favorite book or movie that offers you a travel escape or inspires you to adventure?
Oh, travel movie. I don't really have a travel movie. I don't know whether you can call it travel, but Men in Black is my favorite movie. It's like, I want that pen, and they have that memory erase thing, right? And I'm like, if I have that pen, I'll go to every woman and then erase their bad travel memories. Because I have met women who stopped traveling because some traumatic experience happened. So I do think that, okay, it doesn't really count in a travel movie, but yes, I do love that movie. That's my go-to movie to laugh.
I thank you for sharing it in that context too. What is always in your suitcase or backpack when you travel?
Oh, a lot of lip balm. I'm a person with chappy lip. So no matter what the weather I'm traveling into, it's lip balm, different kind of lip balm, shapes, sizes, flavors. I have different lip balms. So, yes,
so good. It also is really good if you forget your hand lotion. You have seen me for sure putting chapstick on my hands.
Cheap travel tricks.
Yes. What has been your favorite destination you've traveled to?
Pondicherry has to be my first love. I have traveled there so many times, but I don't think I'm tired of that destination. It's just super amazing place to be. It's serene for me. It's a very nice place. So Pondicherry, for people who don't know, people who don't belong to India, Pondicherry was a French colony of India, but it's a coastal union territory on the east coast. Yes, east coast of India. Very beautiful place. Very beautiful place.
Where do you still long to visit?
Australia, Brisbane, to Catherine. I have never seen her in real life, but yes, I do wish to. Yes, that's another fascinating thing. The biggest impact on my life, 2 people have had are Nisha and Catherine, and I haven't met them in person. So it's amazing. Just our values that bind us together, but it's very impactful. So I do, that's the place I'm longing to visit. I really want to go to Brisbane.
I hope that happens for you. It will be amazing.
I hope that too.
What do you eat that immediately connects you to a place that you've been?
Okay, that's a difficult question. What do I eat? Fish fry, Pondicherry.
Who is the person that inspired and encouraged you to set out to explore the world?
Catherine. Catherine has to be the person.
Yeah. And if you could take an adventure with one person, fictional or real or live, alive or past, who would it be?
I'd love to travel with my mother. I haven't traveled with her ever. So yes, that's she's very alive, fortunately. And I would love to travel with her. Anywhere, just anywhere. She hasn't traveled with me ever.
I've been lucky to travel with my mom a few times, and it's been pretty amazing. You're different people when you're out there in the world. So it's fun to get to do that. Well, again, just thank you so much. I feel like people are really going to be inspired and hopefully a little fired up from this conversation. And I look forward to seeing what that ripple is. And I'm just so grateful for you giving us your time today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It has been a really wonderful conversation. And I really hope that people reach out to me and you for the work I am doing, for the work you are doing. And you are on a very beautiful journey. And I'm super, super sure that a lot of like-minded women are going to be super inspired by the work you do. And I'm super blessed to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.